bonds well between us, and I think it's time for both of us to kind of just move forward. I care about you a lot, but I think that this is the best decision for me. So, yeah.
Welcome, traveler. I hope the distance you've traveled and the road taken was kind to you. If you feel laden and sunken, do not fret. We are here together. And I see you fight this battle too, fighting it to not drown you. Come with me. Take my hand. I'll show you the places you can be. Out in the air, breeze in your hair, the green of the trees, the hum of the bees. Outside and awake should be a want and not a desperate need. So until you're there, I'll write these words, show you the world that welcomes you into a soft embrace. As always, I'm Samantha, here with the warmest soul to all the journeyed to indeed journey.
Hey there, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here with you and the traveler, wherever this moment might be in time. As always, I want to take a moment to thank all who've come before to help us be here in this space. And Samantha, that was a very beautiful wisp of words. I think the feeling that I felt myself, especially the hold the hand part, it made me feel warm, like quite literally, like in that little comforting space. And, with some of the things that we're going to be going into today, I think it's nice to be able to take that with that compassionate look together and taking a hand-in-hand approach, right?
I felt that was going to be strongly needed.
I think that I have been doing some actual thinking about this, especially since it's been a minute now since we've done a book club episode here. Since we've taken the time to, honestly, I'm trying to take the time to meditate on what we've been reading. And really coming from a place where you hear the roar in the background of enchanted beings. But no, quite literally. Really taking the time to meditate on like some of the more harsh aspects of life, right? What these wrathful deities, and especially the Dakinis, represent, and really trying to take the time to think of like how these are to serve the Dharma, right? To serve the purpose to end suffering, right? So when we're talking about these emanations of wrath, when we've talked about some of these very graphic forms of these deities at times, and bodhisattvas, and again, like I said, dakinis and ascended masters and all these different things, taking each approach of how that is to serve, again, not only the Dharma but in compassion, right? And specifically is the lens that I'm taking through this and understanding it through with love. Not love isn't the right word necessarily, but with the respect and veneration that it deserves, right? And how it's not these things like war and pestilence and darker, literally, as we're going to be reading to, is the signs of death, right? And the breaking the illusion of reality, and especially the tool that's supposed to be serving the Dharma, right? And really think that's, again, one is always, it brings me more gratitude for the present moment, first and foremost. It makes me really it has a lot of gratitude to be here, to be able to take the time to explore, right? Here with you in a place that is inherently, as I understand it, safe, right? And being able to take the time and just be fools and talk about this, right? But then really trying to take the macro approach to things, and like how I approach life, and like dealing with like the people I deal with on a regular basis at work, or watching an empire fall, a colonial empire fall before my eyes, and the world right now with what's going on in U.S. politics, right? And making me really trying to take those things and the approach of the, like, again, trying to, the breaking of the illusionment of the, and like, how do we actually act with compassion? How do we actually act in a way that is as I understand inherently, like in principles of radical equity and sustainability and stuff like that, right? And try and do the next right thing on a macro scale, right? And tend to have those approaches. And, it's exhausting sometimes dealing with the world that we're going around, but really trying to take it as like, okay, really seeing it for what it is, but like, how do we come back to here? Because all I can get is control, like we were talking about before we were this episode, the little things that we can control to actually like be okay here and everything like that. So I guess that's what I wanted to say with like kind of where we've been, and especially why I really appreciated your introduction there, especially the holding hand approach, right? And that's why I think I really connected with it, because of it really feels like that when we're going through this book together and taking the time to have that explore and like go through these pretty intense things in both reflection of life and some of the more radiant, peaceful, and wrathful deities. It's really nice to be able to be in this presence with someone else and take that journey together. So, Traveler, wherever you're at, I just want to take the whole wrap the picture and say thank you, Sam, for being here.
Thank you, Saul, for being here in your beautiful way with words. I appreciate how you've really summed all of that up. It's nice to be at a moment together where we can just kind of learn as we go together more about the balance that this book in particular brings, and it kind of becomes a reflection of the imbalances within humans, I feel, and to see the sides of the peaceful and the wrathful deities. It's intimidating and kind of daunting, for sure. And as we get into the natural liberation through recognition of the visual indications and signs of death, I think that it's really important that, we take those moments to feel grounded where we're at, in a safe space, in a spot where you are with somebody who, you can truly share vulnerabilities with. And this week, I feel like that's been a very strong theme, is finding your safety within the people that you surround yourself with. And I think going through this journey alongside one another has been very, very grounding for both of us as we search within ourselves and come to our own compassionate understandings for ourselves and like one another and the world that we live in and like the people that are around us, so that we can go forward and be a little bit different in life, whether that's, finding representation wherever that may be, and just kind of holding to heart what we read within this text specifically, and just kind of like continue on our exploration of that and what it means to us and how we can hold that within ourselves.
How do we take care of ourselves while taking care of other people, one step at a time, and hopefully breaking the cycles of suffering to reach some kind of peace?
Mm-hmm. We can only give so much.
One step at a time until the radical step of it just happening.
Yeah. Ain't that the darn truth?
We already know out of a book out the diamond vehicle and sudden enlightenment, so we should have the assumption that it just goes like a light switch.
Yeah. Yep. Quite literally.
Well,
oh man.
Shall we, Sam?
We shall.
Well, Traveler, we're going to begin today at Section 8, the natural liberation through recognition of the visual indications and signs of death. Context. Since the human body is regarded as an abode of deities, it is the responsibility of the practitioner to protect the body from the causes of harm, disease, and premature death, and to foster the conditions which support an active and unencumbered life up to the natural exhaustion of the lifespan. I will have a personal note. I do believe that is hard to do within capitalism. This chapter... Thank you. This chapter describes 6 categories of signs indicative of the time of death, together with a variety of techniques for purposefully eliciting specific indications of death. Also described in the section titled Signs of External extremely near death are the experiential and outer signs that occur during the process of dying. Lastly, the signs that are indicative of the nature of the future of rebirth, which occur at or after death, are described. This chapter and the following chapter, Natural Liberation of Fear Through the Ritual Deception of Death, are inextricably interlinked. Should the predictive signs described in this chapter definitively arise, then it is expected that the appropriate practices described in the following chapter, Natural Liberation of Fear Through the Ritual Deception of Death, should be undertaken without delay. The sophisticated description of the process of dying contained in the sections Signs of Extremely Near Death concurs with the understanding of the process of death commonly found in classical Buddhist literature. If you want a detailed description of the process of death, you can see H.H. Dalai Lama's Advice on Dying. Oh, H.H. His Holiness. There we go. That's what it's short for. I figured that out. I got there. This section forms a component of the Liberation by Hearing, Chapter 11, and is a vital aspect of the guidance to be given by qualified spiritual teachers at the time of death, which, once again, I don't believe me or Samantha are claiming qualifications for that. The predictive signs of death, however, are more idiosyncratic and show influences from Tibetan folklore and traditional medicine. Further, in terms of the predictive signs of death, it is said that the subtler signs described here can only be accurately recognized by those who are continuously engaged in meditative practice. I am one to believe more and more so in theory, whether you like it or not, you're inherently always doing meditative practice, but I'm not willing to go down that rabbit hole yet. The elucidation and analysis of predictive signs is not a common practice today, except in the case of certain signs in the context of traditional medicine. Nonetheless, this text demonstrates a powerful sensitivity to impertinence and the sustained sensitivity to one's immediate experience.
Herein is contained the natural liberation through recognition of the visual indications and signs of death, an extract from the Peaceful and Wrathful Deities, a profound sacred teaching entitled Natural Liberation Through Recognition of Enlightened Intention. I bow down to the naturally radiant, peaceful, and wrathful deities, manifestations of the three Buddha bodies. This natural liberation through the recognition of signs, which is a technique for analyzing the onset of death, is presented as a supporting text to this natural liberation by hearing in the intermediate states. Study it repeatedly, O child of Buddha nature. Samaya. Alas, this illusory and feeble aggregate of form, created from compounded past actions and conditions like the flame of a butter lamp blowing in the wind, cannot last forever. Nothing at all exists which is not subject to the conditioning of death. And indeed, since it is uncertain when death will occur, one should constantly be cognizant of the signs of impending death. I think about that too often. And strive after the accumulation of virtue. There are two primary conditions responsible for the death of human beings. First, untimely death, and second, death due to the natural exhaustion of the lifespan. Untimely or sudden death may be averted by successful application of the ritual deception of death. But death due to the natural exhaustion of the lifespan is like the burning out of a butter lamp. So there is no way of averting this through ritual deception, and thus, if this is indicated, one should make preparations to depart. In either case, however, it is most important to engage in the following analysis. This teaching on the visual indications and signs of death is presented in terms of 6 general topics, namely external, internal, and secret signs of death, signs of remote death, signs of near death, and lastly, miscellaneous signs of death. captivating. When investigating the time of death, first one should make offerings to the visualized assemblies of spiritual teachers, meditational deities, and dakinis, and please the protectors of the sacred teachings with torma offerings. Then one should present feast offerings to one's fellow practitioners and also engage in charitable acts. Then the signs of death should be examined in the following way.
External signs of death. First, when the examination of external signs is made, it is the bodily characteristics that should be investigated, because the signs of death will arise in relation to these characteristics. The body is composed of the 4 elements, thus the following portents of its demise will arise prior to the time of death: loss of appetite, dullness of the sense faculties, a feeling of anger which consumes the body, speech, and mind, distracted or depressed thoughts, disturbed dreams, character changes, and fading complexion. These are the portents indicating that life-threatening hindrances may arise. More particularly, there are the following specific physical signs of death. If the fingernails and toenails become bloodless or lusterless, this indicates death after 9 months, less half a day. If the cornea of the eyes begin to cloud over, this indicates death after 5 months. If the hair on the nape of the neck grows upwards, this indicates death after 3 months. Then again, more generally, if one urinates, defecates, and sneezes simultaneously, this too is an indication of death. I've heard that actually in a couple of different places. I definitely remember that as a folklore as a kid, that if all 3 happened at once, I would die. I remember being told, and I definitely didn't grow up anywhere near any kind of Tibetan folk tradition, but I definitely remember being as a kid, if I did all 3 at the same time, I'd die.
I also remember being haunted by that.
Yeah, so that's a fun little connection point right there.
Love to see it.
This too is an indication of death. Also, if one's urine falls in 2 forks, again, I didn't know that one, but I've had that happen plenty of times. If one's muscles become utterly loose and flabby, if feces are excreted and semen ejaculated simultaneously, if one's body odor changes dramatically, if one's conduit changes dramatically, if one blushes a little and one's complexion becomes pallid, if the tones of one's voice becomes thin and one's eyes becomes sunken, if the space above the bridge of the nose becomes exfoliated, if the eyes do not cleverly perceive forms, or if they perceive incorrectly, and so forth. If the ears do not hear, or the hearer incorrectly, if the nose does not smell or smells incorrectly, if the tongue does not taste or else tastes incorrectly, if the point between the eyebrows is affected. Honestly, this sounds a lot like COVID, just saying. Or evaporation ceases from the crown of one's head. These signs may all indicate that one has fallen into the hands of the Lord of Death. Which, I mean, if there was a giant global pandemic that did happen, I mean, that did again sound like a giant global pandemic. Furthermore, while in good health, the following techniques for eliciting indications can also be applied. When the closed eyes are pressed with fingers, the minute circles of light which appear are absent from the lower part of the left eye. This indicates that one may die after 6 months. But if they are absent from the upper part of that eye, one may die after 3 months. If the same circles are absent from the directions from the left or nostril, this indicates that one may die after 1 month. If they are absent from the direction of the left ear, this indicates that they may die after 2 months. Resuming this process focusing on the right eye, if the circles are absent from the lower part of the right eye, one should know that they may die after 10 days. If they are absent from the upper part of the right eye, this indicates that one may die after 5 days. If they are absent from the direction of the right ear, this indicates that one may die after 3 days. And so if they are absent from the direction of the right nostril, one should know that they may die after 2 days, even if one is not sick. Interesting to know that something I did often as a childhood was also an indication for death. I didn't know I was practicing my predictive powers. Or I guess just trying to be aware of signs of death, I used to be to say. That's cool. That's good. It's really fun to think about because I did that all the time as a kid, and that's apparently the ways to indicate. I would have been totally me messing with people if I knew that. Yeah, as a kid,
Oh
if like,
my God,
I would be
right?
I'd be so playing around in the schoolyard. Be, oh, well, looks like 3 days left. I don't know what that. I'd be so messed. Oh, that'd be so fun. I wish I knew that. I wish I knew that.
I'd be like, where do you see lights? Oh,
Yeah.
nice knowing you.
Let me check. Let me check real quick.
Yeah.
Oh, I would have totally lived that guy. I would have. That would be fun.
We would
Or
have been.
I would have been
We
a
would have
terror.
been. Yeah, we would have been the toxic kids on the playground, telling everybody that they're going to die in 6 months.
I would have totally tried to have been some like crazy Oracle kid and been like, "What's that weird dude doing over there?" Just pretending the crows tell me. And I can see one of the spots on my eye. Oh, I wish I knew that folklore, Dan. That would be fun. I guess this is why you're supposed to have these in the teachings of sacred teachers and profound masters. They are not profound ascended masters, because and they're not in the arms of teenaged tall because the different applications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Secondly, if when ears are cupped with the fingers, no humming sound is heard throughout an entire day, one should know that one may die after 6 years. Interesting that would jump to years. If it is absent for 2 days, one may die after 6 years, less 2 months. Similarly, for each additional day, the sound that the sound is absent, this indicates that one may die decrementally after 3 fewer months. That is, if the sound is absent for a third or fourth day, death may come after 3 or 6 fewer months, respectively. It has also been said that the number of days indicates might not necessarily be definite. If there are also external signs of death, such as if one feels continuously angry and short-tempered, if one feels fearful whenever one may be, if one's positive prescriptive devotion and similar qualities ebb away, if one feels aversion towards sanity means, if one feels depressed, whether one may be, and constantly wishes to go elsewhere, if one wishes to be separated from sympathetic Buddhist companions, if one delights in the social diversions and distracted activities of cyclic existence, or if one feels excessive attachment, aversion, pride, or envy, these might all indicate that one has fallen into the hands of the Lord of Death. These, the above, are called the external signs of death, which it is said can be averted by the ritual deception of death. The techniques by which are averted should be studied by referring to the ritual deception of death, chapter which follows. I think that it's definitely really interesting coming from the place of thinking of like these are the causes and conditions that lead you to death, and then obviously is getting a chapter ahead, as we know, trying to get on the causes and conditions to avert those things. I really think of that just as a really different way to think of life and like a different way to think of death, and like not necessarily as this predictive thing, but like as these causes and conditions of life, and like you can not choose your own destiny per se, but like advert, and like go down these, you can do your reaction, I guess, control the, I don't know, it's an interesting way to think about it.
It is an interesting way to think about that.
Yeah.
Now for the internal signs of death. The investigation of the internal signs of death comprises the examination of vital breath and the examination of dreams, starting with the examination of the vital breath. Around the time of the vernal or autumnal equinox, at daybreak on the first day of the lunar month, one should sit upright with the body in the 7-point posture of Vairocana. Then one should observe the vital breath and note from which nostril this emerges. If at this time the vital breath is moving through the left nostril, then for a period of 3 days, the breath will continue to move exclusively through the left nostril. So what I'm reading is anytime you're congested, death.
It's actually something, if you want to do it one time you're trying to do a breath exercise or meditating, notice which one your breath comes out of, because it will change. It changes throughout the entire day all the time. It depends on what your mucous membrane's doing and like how your like drainage and stuff. I actually, when I was doing my undergrad in a freaking yoga class, it was the first time my teacher there was like, hey, dude, try this meditation, because it was like a 6 a.m. class. So we would always start with the breathing one. And every day it was a different nostril. When I did it, it would, sometimes it'd do 2 days of right in the rope, and then it would switch back to the left or whatever. So that's actually, yeah, if you want to actually take a moment in the morning, the first thing you do, take a moment to breathe in and just see which one has a better airflow, because sometimes they're pretty decent, both of them, when it's on, like, I have a really good sinus, especially when I was living back in Arizona, right, because it's so dry there. But especially as I've been congested, I've noticed it every day. I've been really aware of it this past week because of all the drainage I've had, and where I've literally it's been switching all day long, where it goes between one or the other. Yeah,
today I learned.
Yeah. It's it's legit meditation thing. Yeah, 100%.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to be thinking about that like every morning now.
I'm not joking. I'm saying everything's a meditation. Like, that is
100%.
Really, yeah. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It's meditation.
I'm going to be like obsessively writing down every morning like which nostril I believe is the strongest for that day.
I genuinely want to know. Like, just send me a text every morning of that. That would be such a fascinating journal.
We're going to create like the data for it.
Yeah, I'll text you back. I'll be like, right today, and then you'll be like, oh, I'm interesting. I'm also right, and I'll be like, oh, I guess we should turn left today.
Just turn left, only left.
I guess we should find out actually real quick and read the next thing of what that sign is. We should finish this.
Yeah, we should. I agree. But then on the fourth day, it will change. Okay, so on the fourth day, it will change. And proceed to move through the right nostril for 3 days. Thus, it will alternate in this way every 3 days between the two nostrils. Observe this process and count the number of days diligently, and do not make a mistake. If no error is made in the counting, and if the breath moves successively in this way, and then begins to move erratically over 1.5 months, it is said that one may die after a further 6 months. If the breath begins to move erratically after 1 month, it is said that severe misfortunes may occur. If it begins to move erratically after 2 weeks, it is said that serious illness may occur. If it moves erratically after 5 days, it is said that slander and calumny may occur. If the breath does not alternate from one nostril to the other over a 10-day period, then as soon as it does change, one may die. If it moves simultaneously through both nostrils and the mouth, this indicates that one may die after half a day. And if it ceases to move through the nose and instead moves only through the mouth, it is said that one will die immediately. Moving on to the examination of the signs of death which occur in dreams.
So, real quick, so that's what we're going to be doing then. That's the meditation, right? That's what we got to figure out. We just got to practice this for this period.
Not me trying to breathe out through both my nostrils and my mouth.
Every morning you just do this little thing and you just check in.
Yeah. First, one should know that those dreams which occur in the late evening or around midnight are unreliable. But if one dreams between dawn and daybreak that one is riding a cat or a white monkey with a red face while moving further and further towards the east, it is said that this is a sign of death caused by king spirits. If one dreams of riding a tiger, fox, or corpse, or of riding a buffalo, pig, camel, or donkey while moving further and further towards the south, this is a sign of death, indicating that one has fallen into the hands of Yama. Furthermore, if one dreams of eating faces, of wearing black cloves of yak hair while plunging downwards, of being trapped in a wicker basket or snare, of being bound with iron chains, or of copulating repeatedly with a black figure or animal, these are also signs which are indicative of death. If one dreams of being disemboweled by a fierce black woman, and that one's entrails are spilling out, or that a black man arrives wielding an iron mace, and coming into one's presence he tells you to depart, or if one dreams that one is being dragged along by a black rope attached to the neck, or that one is inside a lofty red-colored castle, surrounded by a moat and perimeter wall, or if one dreams of being decapitated and having one's head carried off by another, or of being surrounded by crows, anguished spirits, or villains, or of being willingly led away or leaving home in a bridal procession, of being naked with one's hair cut off and beard shaved, of constantly associating with friends who have died, of being dragged along by a crowd of dead people, of jumping into water, sinking into mud, or being swallowed by fish, of entering a womb and falling asleep, of being overcome in a battle in which the other side is victorious, of wearing red clothing and being adorned with red garlands, of repeatedly picking red flowers or climbing a mountain of red shellac, of having one's head wrapped in a red silk turban, of twigs growing on the crown of your head and birds nesting there, of falling asleep repeatedly in a terrifying charnel ground, of being old and carrying a heavy burden, of the sun and moon falling to the plains, leaving one shrouded in darkness, of jumping headlong into a pit, of dancing together with a host of ogres, or setting out thinking one will roam to unfamiliar distant lands never to return. If such dreams and others like them occur when one is not sick, they are indefinite with respect to the time of death, and one may be released from their indications by means of the appropriate ritual service. If, however, such dreams continually recur, this indicates that one will die within a year. If one should dream of the sun and moon being eclipsed, falling to the plains, or repeatedly setting, one's father, mother, or teacher may die. And it is said that if they are sick at the time, their death will be inevitable. The above are called the internal signs of death, which are slightly more difficult to avert through ritual deception than the aforementioned external signs.
The secret signs of death. The secret signs of death will now be described. When the external and internal signs of death occur, they can be averted by repeatedly performing the ritual deception of death. If, however, the external and internal signs are not successfully reversed, one should then examine the secret signs in the following way. Having first generated the mind aspiring to supreme enlightenment, and then take refuge in offered prayers, one should examine on the morning of the first day of the month the flow of one's semen and or menstrual blood. It is said that if the semen of a man is blackish yellow, or if the menstrual blood of a woman is whitish, death may occur after 2 months. If the semen of the man is reddish, he may die or be subjected to slander after 6 months. However, if its natural whiteness is undiminished, this indicates that there's no obstacle to life. And the semen should be inhaled through the nose while it is still warmed. This is itself a rite associated with the ritual deception of death. Furthermore, if semen flows without any blissful sensations, and it is intercepted with quicksilver-like globules the size of sesame seeds, it is said that one will die imminently. If the flow of one's menstrual blood is unceasing, and if at the time she dreams she is picking red flowers, this indicates that death will soon follow. Moreover, if a man's continual spiritorora, that's a new word, even when not engaged in sexual intercourse, it is said that he may die after 4 months. Can you look up what that word means for us real quick?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to keep reading here. Even when not engaged in sexual intercourse, it is said that he may die after 4 months. If a black mole suddenly appears for the first time at the orifice of the glands of the penis, or if one has an undistracted and contained sexual desire thinking only for women, and one allows one's commitments in respect of the third empowerment to degenerate, these are not only signs of death, but also omens that one will later proceed to rebirth in the indestructible hells. Therefore, if one does not confess and repair these generations fully, one will experience the fierce sufferings of the hells. In order to confess the effective, however, you should perform the ritual deceptions pertaining to the secret signs of death. Yet death will be harder to deceive than the two preceding categories. The above are called the secret signs of death. without getting too far into it or anything on this podcast or anything like that, it's good to know that according to at least the secret signs of death, there's been continued no obstacles in my path, and I appreciate that.
I do, yeah. I did look at the definition of the word spermaturia. So it's a condition of excessive involuntary seminal discharge. In several cultures, it's referred to ejaculation outside of certain approved sexual practices and was thus a subjective term. But in this case, it is in terms of excessive involuntary seminal discharge.
Involuntary excessive. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how it's, obviously, if we're talking about in different cultural contexts, but I wonder if that's just like, because it's such a rare, there's a medical condition I'm aware of where someone can, like just come on with that willingness, and it's like debilitating for that individual that I'm aware of.
Yeah, it sounds like that's what it is. In Western medicine, during the 19th century, they felt that the cure for that was chastity and avoidance of masturbation, or circumcision sometimes being used as treatment. But traditional Chinese medicine counts the production of semen as one of the biggest drains on the yin, which is the kidney essence. It is a recognized disorder in traditional Chinese medicine in which certain patterns of involuntary ejaculation reflect problems with kidney qi.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is very interesting. We could totally go down like a rabbit hole of like the cultural significance of that for a few.
All of it, right?
Yeah, that's wild.
Because all this, because that's the thing, you have to put this in the cultural context, right? Because this is
Correct.
Coming from Tibetan folklore is self-described, right? This isn't, what's meditative outside of accepted in current practice. This isn't used to diagnose or actually do this in the same context, but it's now used as a meditative tool to conceptualize the impermanence of life, right, and death, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting to think, though, how we're going back to one again. This is where people think that all Buddhists are chaste. I'm like, no, clearly not. That's not how.
No, yeah.
The only a very small select Buddhist clergy are celibate. Most Buddhists aren't celibate in any meaning of the word. So, and really going back specifically to Tibetan, because one of the things that's really interesting, and I've gotten a little bit more down the rabbit hole of actually learning the cultural history of Vajrayana tradition and Tibetan Buddhism, is understanding that there's some of the new thought about it is actually that because Buddhism originally comes out of India, right, south of the Himalayas, though, right, not north of the Himalayas, and the thought is that it actually Buddhism didn't really get into Tibet until really around the 8th century, where it was already pretty refined thing, and the Tibetan school became essentially the experts in all of them and kind of made their diamond tradition, right? And that's where it gets into the whole history of Chinese Buddhism and influence around the world. Where a lot of traditions of Buddhism died in India that survived in Tibet, but they also think now that, similar to maybe Shintoism, that some of the full traditions in Tibet itself actually were influenced by those early Buddhist teachings, actually. So very similar to Shintoism, where you already kind of have this mix of Buddhism with already cultural traditions prior to the invocation of what we understand as the mainstreams of Buddhism now in these cultures. It's potentially interesting to think that, again, this is how these cultures going around how many thousands of years ago thought that if you masturbated or had sex or whatever, but produced semen, right, or checked your menstrual blood at the beginning of the month, literally could have a secret sign of death and the relationship with the world, or not even a sign of death, but however, if its natural whiteness is undiminished, this indicates that there's no obstacle to life, like that everything's cool, like it's even like everything's fine in vanity and everything like that. So it's just interesting to think that, like, because again, it's acknowledged in the context at the beginning of this chapter. This is 100%. Not necessarily how we practice in medicine or look for the signs of death anymore, but it's now used as a way to meditate. So using it as that way to meditate, thinking about humans 2,000, 6,000, however many thousand years ago, right? Thinking of life like this is just wild. It's such a different
way. It is.
different relationship with the world. I never thought until this moment, thinking of my semen as a way to predict if I'm okay. I mean, I've always known if something doesn't work, I should go talk to my doctor, but like, I didn't think of that as like an imminent sign of death, or the fact that I'm, everything's fine. I didn't think that I was like, hey, everything's all good in the life too. I never had that association to life.
Interesting, because my brain immediately went to, while it was like describing a woman's menstrual blood and like a man's ejaculation, my brain immediately goes to, well, yeah, that makes sense to my logical Western medicine understanding, or like, of indicators that there is something that is seriously wrong with the human body. Like if you are ejaculating a different color, or your menstrual blood is a different color, there is something that is inherently wrong with your reproductive system. So to me, it makes sense that these become visual signs and secret signs, right? Because thousands of years ago, we didn't have the medicine and like the study of medicine the way that we do today. So it does make sense to me that these become secret signs of imminent death, because like they could have been indicative of a kind of cancer or a kind of disease that was rampant in the reproductive system, specifically talking about like those two things that were mentioned.
I think that's interesting, because I do understand that, especially if you're having such a ritualistic observation of yourself, where everything is like intentional meditation, where you are being that. What's inherent, as we would talk about it in intentional and almost OCD, about like your observation of your behaviors to be that. And OCD, but I think that that doesn't also acknowledge the reality that everyone's body does go through cycles of change. Like I can tell you for a fact that, again, not to be too vulgar here, but in my experience, it's not always the same color, and I've not necessarily had to go to a doctor because of that, right? Or to my knowledge, I haven't died, or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like my body has gone through things, and I'm not saying always in the healthy spot, but I'm also thinking of like when I've peed green before. I'm pretty sure that'd be not a good sign of life.
Not a good sign. Yeah.
It was a sign that I had way too many energy drinks, and I was a young kid and doing damage to myself, that I hope that by not having energy drinks anymore, I'm not doing it anymore.
I was just about to say, another thing is like indicative of like your diet, like what you eat changes the color of things. But I'm like, if your menstrual blood is white, something just got out of your body that should be inside your body.
And I'm saying, if a man is blackish, all of a sudden, or something like that, right? All of a sudden, there's some new color where it's not supposed. Yeah, and I understand. And that's where I understand, like, especially the meditation of it, right? Really thinking about that aspect, and really, and I think I always did have that relationship to it. I mean, I can only speak from experience when I've had, and without getting too graphic, but in some of my medical experiences, when I've seen red, in that environment, it's something that puts me on, because it's a very primal thing to be like, oh, that's not something that should be red. And when at the same, so when you do see that contrary color, I do understand that you do have this almost visceral reaction as a human, right? For being honest. So I do understand what you're talking about. That homosexuality is almost this natural thing. I think it's just, I think it's important. I think in my meditation of it, realistically, is I want to, as I'm processing it, I guess is the word I want to say. It really does think to me, it's like, it's so interesting to try and be so specific with it. And I understand that these are really tools that they were being used by the folklore and the tradition and the people at the time, to be like, no, these are ways so you can be predictive powers. And again, these can all be averted within the following chapter. Right? So these are just, these aren't even set in stone things, right? Even the ones that are like, nope, your imminent death is coming up. Like, here's how to, we can potentially avert it and everything.
Yeah, like that, this is how we can
cause a condition.
Yeah, exactly. This is how we can get back in touch and in tune with your spiritual beliefs. And this is how, we can get down into these practices that might free you from this, or cleanse the part of, whatever moves forward within the realms to be able to come back into life or continue on the different planes of existence, right?
I'm just saying out, going back to the examination of the signs of death that occurs in dreams. If I all of a sudden have, I'm dancing with a host of ogres, and then the next time I wake up with an extra little morning surprise, and it's the wrong color, I'm gonna call you.
Yeah, please do, please.
Yeah, like, Sam.
I need that frantic call. at
Sam,
5 a.m. that says,
just panic calling you, Sam. Something's happened. we gotta read the next chapter. I can't wait to the next podcast. We gotta go ahead.
We gotta do it right now. In the background, Shrek's like, it's not ogre yet.
It's not ogre yet. Oh, I loved it. I did. That was the line that just caught me from when you were reading The Dream to Death, just dancing together with a host of ogres. I'm like, yes, Shrek 5's coming out. Let's do this.
I'm so excited for Shrek 5. We are getting off topic, but I'm very excited for Shrek 5. I do think that it's also indicative of just human behavior, that one of the external signs is depression. Like if you're depressed, like there's an innate time that's going to pass before you die unless you do this ritual to like cleanse yourself. And I think that's also, just very true, because thinking about the human body as a system is, when you become depressed, your body stops functioning correctly, right? Your immune system is weakened. You might not be able to take care of yourself. And so different things pop up and different things become diseased, or, like your body just begins to slowly deteriorate. And for like me, I think reading that just it really resonated and seemed that, and when we do this ritual to help you, that can be like a moment of hope and a moment of like reawakening for that person who might be experiencing that depression. And like, yeah, cool. If that ritual works, then amazing. This person does feel like maybe they can move forward with their meditation. But I totally understand, like, and see, like, because I'm taking anatomy and physiology right now, so my brain is constantly thinking about the human body, and so it's like, yeah, that makes sense to me why depression becomes an external sign of death.
Everything's meant
or internal sign.
I do with that.
I do like that, because I do think it's true. I think if you're going to stop and think about how you approach the day, taking that moment to be more mindful is a form of meditation. Taking a moment to slow your brain down, that's a form of meditation. Taking a moment to appreciate a food that you might be about to consume, that's a form of meditation. If you're in a moment with good company, you just want to slow down and be present and take that in, that is a form of meditation. I can wholeheartedly get behind that, Paul.
I think that one of the things I really connected with what you were saying there, right? And just going back to the reflection, especially when you're talking about where you're at with your personal studies outside of our book club, which is the only real studies I care about in your world, Sam. There's nothing else. This is the most important class right here, right? This is sad suffering right here, Sam. I don't know about that. I'm just kidding. It's all for it, right?
My everyday is suffering.
I think going, especially combining that with what you were talking about, and combining what this, especially the context, I really resonate with. Like, no, we're not trying to claim that this is the actual, at this point, the recognition that this isn't to actually be a predictive power necessarily.
Yeah.
But to be necessary as a meditation. I want to go back to that section, but I actually want to give me 1 second here. This predictive signs of death, however, are more idiosyncratic and shown influences from Tibetan folklore, traditional medicine. Further, in terms of predictive signs of death, it is said that cellular signs of death can only be described by accurately recognized by those who are continuously engaged in meditative practices. The elicitation and analysis of the predictive signs is not a common practice today, except in the case of certain signs in the context of traditional medicine. Nonetheless, this text demonstrates a powerful sensitivity to the impermanence and sustained sensitivity to one's immediate experience. That's, I think, I'm going to be honest with you. It was really fun getting into the secret signs of death and the dream ones, right? Because the dream ones are like fun because it's the interpretations. I always love interpretation of dream. And so every culture has some version of that. And I think it's always so interesting to get into what these points are. I mean, like the jumping off headlong into a pit, like, whoa, I've had dreams where I've jumped into a pit before and something like that. But at the same time, I've never had a dream where, I've had the moon and the stars collapse on me. Like, to be thinking of that as like the world collapsing on you and everything like that. And obviously getting into the secret signs of death is fun because we're getting into like some destigmatizing the notion of Buddhism celibacy.
Right.
But really getting into the context right there of understanding that we're not saying that in the we're still having, this is all in the context of traditional medicine. This is not what we're
Correct.
saying equating to Western medicine. But we,
No.
Sam, have that built-in understanding of it, right? So really going from it with that bias, because that is our causes and conditions and our starting point. But nonetheless, this text demonstrated powerful sensitivity to the impertinence and the sustained sensitivity of one's immediate experience. And again, coming back to what we're talking about now, again, when I'm yelling here, it's like, no, it's all meditation anyway. That's the rabbit hole I want to go down, right? But really taking that application of, right, like what we understand with Western medication, still being able to, like what you were saying, I really love your analysis and your perception of, like, no, like I completely connect with, like, you know, if something was wrong with your flow at the beginning of the month, something's wrong with my body, right? And actually having that, like, hey, you're actually right about that. That's a very intuitive thing, and just taking that to the immediate experience. And I think that's, I don't know, I'm not a master, but I think that's kind of the point of this, right? Is to have that, like, oh yeah, that is what it is. Yeah, exactly. This is just for this immediate experience. Yeah, okay.
That light bulb moment.
Because again, that's, I think, what the entire purpose of all these things is, like, oh, we're here, hey, you know, and everything like that. We're in this place of actually of it, right? No, I really like that, Sim. I thought that was dope. I really enjoyed that, the blending of these different things. Again, not in a set of master by any means, and
oh gosh,
we can be our own little beings here, but
we just get to draw our own synchronicities the way that we can when we can while we are studying. And I don't know if we could call this studying, but learning together.
We're reading a book.
We are reading a book. You know, this is the one book that I can read that's not my textbooks right now. So,
I mean, if I'm being really honest with you, right, this is something that I think one of the reasons why I was drawn to this book is because, one, it was directly translated by and endorsed by, like, the actual within my lifetime of the sect, right, of this belief system, right, where this book originates from. And I think that's being able to use this translation as a modern day, essentially modern words, is, I think, really important, because you don't get into, because I struggle so much with the problem of translation. That's why I love looking at the King James Version Bible, because it's got a unicorn in it, right? And all these different things and everything like that, right? Because translations are such a problem, and, like, to have a text that's actually properly translated as close to we can be in mass translatable text, it's hard. It's a very any religious document is so scrutinized and stigmatized because of people's belief systems. And it has those inherent
translations.
Exactly. There's translations of it, right? So
multiple.
Exactly. So being able to, like, go to this one that was also bastardized when Buddhism and Eastern religion first came into the U.S. and the translation was so far poorly changed in some of the other versions, and where you get some of these new age cults that eventually spring out of it and stuff like that. And this, like, that, so I think there's almost this, like, no, like, actual, like, what is this knowledge? And I think that's important to understand, like, going back to these actual cultures and going back to their places instead of what some white dude wrote about it. Even though I understand I'm very unethically ambiguous folk and everything like that, and I am not, and that's why I try not to claim any kind of authority or actual veneration over this, but I'm just some folk reading a book here and having an analysis with my friend over it.
We are just, like, two human beings.
Yeah, but I think that's why it's really important to actually, like I said, to take the time to actually go through this and read, like, no, this is something that was, I don't want to, corrupt is not the right word, but, like, just changed, and not in good ways. And to be able to, like, actually just appreciate what it is for it, I think, is a really important thing, especially as we live in this culture where, what is real? What is this? You know, can we trust online? And all these different things. And I think it's really important to take the time to actually, like, again, honor the world that came before us.
No, I agree. I think that was beautifully summarized. Do you have any final thoughts? I feel like we had a good conversation, I think, kind of intermittently, and I think this was a really good way to get those, for me, like, my final thoughts together. And I don't know, I feel like, how do you feel leaving after we've read the secrets of death, the secret signs of death?
I'm definitely excited. I think it was a good choice to meditate on the first, we kind of break it up like we did there, because going back, I want to really take a moment to process, like I said, the dream ones. I thought those were really interesting.
I thought so too. Those were very fascinating.
Yeah, no, I don't know why. I thought that for me personally, especially coming from a different understanding of health, right? It was more interesting to see the external and internal signs of death as like again like this other like using it as a way people view the world and everything like that, but really getting into the dreams and to an extent the secret, I guess, too. It was, again, I really like the dream one because it's just like, and the breath one was the other one I really liked because I want to actually potentially try that meditation just as a meditation practice, right? Not as a necessarily trying to be an oracle over my own premonition, but
just to get into like a very intentional
breath work, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and
an
it's weird,
intentional
and I
moment
like
with
that.
yourself.
And
Yeah,
it's a weird weird's not the right word. I say weird complimentary. I don't want to say this is a derogatory thing. I like it because it's just it's an old tradition. It's something from a couple thousand years ago that I want to try for a few weeks.
Yeah. The dreams was. Go ahead.
Oh,
you go.
Last thing I was going to say is just really going back on the impermanent, trying to take that impermanence element to it. That it's especially as I personally on this radical journey to trying to deconstruct my conception of time and really trying to view it as not a external thing to experience, but as a place. And really trying to understand that through my own kind of anthropomorphic lens. Really trying to understand impermanence over time and place in that context, and really using that kind of reference of what we're just talking about of having fun and connecting with something from a couple thousand years ago potentially, and being able to use that in this time and place really makes me, again, why I like to introduce the podcast like I do and say, wherever we're at, traveler, I'm happy that we're sharing this time and place together, because in this moment we are here together. I think that is a very quite literal thing, and I want to be able to continue to explore what that actually means from a sense of impermanence, and not side of, again, representations, especially of when I get to create a place with someone that I'm not inherently present for.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing. I don't know who's listening to this, but whoever you are, we're inherently in this space, in this moment together in a weird way. And I think that's a weird impermanent thing. And that really kind of sets off some different things in my mind.
It does. It does indeed. And it's kind of funny because like another synchronicity, like kind of an off-kilter synchronicity is my focus right now in my psychology course is like childhood development and like brain lifespan development, lifespan psychology. And part of that is studying the childhood psychology and specifically infancy, object permanence.
Yeah.
So like they don't have, the development for object permanence. It doesn't happen for like the first, I think it's not until like 8 to 12 months. And so when you're playing peekaboo with a kid and you cover up your face with like a 3-month-old and you go, oh, I'm back, you no longer exist to that,
Sam,
to that human.
Kneecaps until you're 10.
Isn't that crazy?
What? Yeah, the development of the human body and brain, and we're still not done growing, and whatever happens to this too.
Yeah. It's okay. So there was one thing that I almost forgot that I wanted to touch base on that I thought was kind of comical, but there is a point in the introduction where it says first untimely death and second death to the natural exhaustion of the lifespan. So I had to watch a video this week for school where it was talking about just the life of this older man and this young girl, and we had to study, like, there were questions that we had to answer about, oh, the girl broke her wrist, where did she break it, look at the x-ray, like look at the fracture, what kind of a fracture was it, classify that. And then when we get to the older gentleman, we learn that bones in your body get replaced every 20 years due to osteocytes, right? And like the other different osteocells that are in your body that kind of eat away at the older bone, and then like another osteocell comes through and repairs and replaces it with new bone growth. And so there was this specific phrase that the narrator said with the old man, who was basically like, the goal in life is to like oh God, I can't remember exactly, but it's like something about like, oh yeah, like the cells are here to reproduce and Bob, the older gentleman, has reproduced and has grandchildren, and so now it's just, he has nothing else to live for. And I just like sat there and I was like, oh, that's so depressing to think about, that after, if I reproduce as a human cell made of many, many other cells, after I reproduce, I don't need to live anymore. Like, that's just wild. But it just like broke my brain for 2 days.
I think using that in the context of like the meditation of it all, right? It's like literally like, and using that, what we understand about like literally cell theory and like energy, and like going back to like the quantum foam, as I like to call it, the literal impermanence of life, like we're talking about, and what that means for, again, like the literal impermanence of death, and like how you were describing now, like what this person created meaning, extrapolating from that, like that once you fulfilled this biological essentially essence, and then you've reached a certain point, now you're at essentially a different place of being, and it has a different meaning with it. That's an interesting, like, kind of just like you said, a mind trip with it, right?
Isn't it?
I don't know if I'm going. Go ahead. So
the association with like the exhaustion of life, like, yeah.
No, I think that's an Eldritch horror. That's an existential terror right there, if you will.
Truly.
At the same time, though, I think that, I don't know if I'm going down, like I say, my initial reaction of that train of thought is it was like to go with the meditation of, again, goes like, no, if it is all impermanent, and that is like part of the cycle of it, into like, that's why when I hope I get old and I do truly have that exhaustion, and I'm like, that's why I want to be nappy all the time. I want to be able to be in my comfy chair and have my little hammock and everything like that, and be in my little stuff, and like enjoy, like actually slow down and sleep for 18 hours of the day and read a little book and everything like that. But I think that's a different extrapolation of it. I think realistically, when I think about it, it's like actually taking it to the biological level. What you were saying right there reminded me, I watched on Reddit literally yesterday, the death of a single-celled organism.
Oh gosh, that's fun.
Watching it exhaust its lifespan and those final moments, and then just go, really was that moment of thinking of like literally going into the meditation of death, right? Of the decomposition and like the exhaustion of the cells and the exhaustion of energy, like you're talking about, of that literally being almost like a sign of death, if you will. And having that be its own kind of meditation with it, literally being that, like, this is I believe, as they called it, the burning of the butter lamp. It's
the burning of the butter lamp.
And then eventually when it melts out into something new, and ideally creating a new light, right? That's fun. That's a trip.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Well.
Thank you, Samantha, for joining us here today. Traveler.
Thank you, Tall.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you very much. I appreciate you. Thank you very much for taking this next step into Ben Book of the Dead with me, Traveler. Wherever you are at, whatever time and space you may find yourself in, I hope you are able to take a step towards ending suffering, and figuring out whatever place and time and being you are at, to have as much compassion with it, and take the causes and conditions that you have and find yourself. Maybe if you are taking the time to reflect on a mandala of death, if you will, envisioning some of the dakinis, taking the time to envision what those more drastic components could look like, right? As we're taking the time to examine the exact physical nature of reality, and we're looking at the exact signs of death here, maybe we can take some time and visualize the dreams, the representations, the abstract. When you take these hard notions, when you think of a quick death, a sudden death, what being would you associate that with? Take the time to put a representation to it. Take the time to, in your own mandala, manifest it. Talk with it. Ask it when it's serving these purposes, if it's for the Dharma. How are you doing it with compassion? How is it doing to end those cyclic existence, right? All these acts are for that purpose, to be here and present and now, to take us to that place, to under the Bodhi tree. Take the time to examine the physical natures of reality, understand them with our traditional concepts and our new concepts. There is no divide between the differences. Take the time to understand the collective summary of human experience as best as you can as your own individual self. As always, you are loved, and you are more than enough. And if you can hear my cat sneezing in the background, bless you, Gary.